The red light goes on. The signal goes out live. And in seconds, millions of viewers become witnesses to unthinkable horror. These aren't scripted scenes or special effects. They're real moments when live television captured humanity's darkest hours, broadcasting tragedy directly into homes around the world, with no way to look away. It was May 23, 2016, when 34-year-old Cameron Blake positioned his mobile broadcasting unit along a desolate stretch of highway outside Moore, Oklahoma. Cameron worked as a meteorologist for a regional news station, known for his fearless storm coverage and ability to make complex weather patterns understandable to viewers. His childhood experience surviving a tornado drove his obsession with understanding these violent storms. Beside him sat 28-year-old Peter Webb, his camera operator, who had voiced concerns about their proximity to the developing supercell. Peter was cautious by nature, but he trusted Cameron's experience and deferred to his judgment, even as the radar showed the storm intensifying at an alarming rate. The afternoon sky had turned an ominous shade of green-gray. Cameron had positioned their modified SUV facing east to capture the storm's approach, explaining the rotation patterns to viewers watching at home. Among those viewers was his wife Jennifer, 7 months pregnant with their first child. The tornado touched down approximately 1 mile southwest of their position, appearing as a dark wedge-shaped column. Cameron's voice remained steady as he narrated the touchdown for nearly 15 seconds, his professional instinct overriding everything else. The funnel moved northeast at 35 miles per hour, closing the distance rapidly. Debris began pelting the vehicle, branches, gravel, and roofing material creating violent hammering sounds. Peter shouted that they needed to leave immediately, but Cameron continued broadcasting. The tornado's outer circulation reached them, and the SUV began rocking violently as gusts likely pushed 120 to 130 miles per hour near the vehicle. Hail and small debris hammered the glass. A broken 2x4 stud, roughly 4 feet long, punched through the driver's side window at an estimated 100 to 120 miles per hour. The tempered glass exploded into pellets. The board fragmented on the window frame, and the leading segment struck Cameron's left temple, causing a depressed skull fracture with bone driven into the brain. A second shard of aluminum siding scissored through the windshield and tore across his right clavicle, likely lacerating the subclavian artery. Bright arterial bleeding pooled across the seat within seconds. Peter managed to accelerate away from the tornado's path, screaming Cameron's name. The mounted camera, streaked with blood and debris, continued recording, its distorted footage catching only fragments of what happened inside the vehicle. Cameron's breathing became irregular and gasping, indicating severe brain trauma and imminent death. Peter drove for approximately 2 minutes before pulling over, pressing his jacket against Cameron's shoulder wound. But the damage was catastrophic. Blood had soaked through Cameron's clothing and pooled on the floor. His face had turned pale gray, his lips blue. The irregular gasping breaths came further apart, then stopped entirely. Peter felt for a pulse but found nothing. The live feed continued transmitting until the station finally cut to the studio. The tornado had deposited debris across the main highway, blocking emergency routes. Responders reached the location nearly 20 minutes later and pronounced Cameron dead at the scene from massive head trauma and blood loss. The station faced immediate backlash for not cutting the feed sooner. Peter resigned 3 weeks later. 11 weeks after his death, Jennifer delivered their daughter, Sophia, at full term and filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the station. It was November 8, 2017, when 41-year-old Lydia Grant arrived at a local television studio in Toronto for what should have been a routine cooking segment. Lydia was a culinary instructor who had been teaching French cuisine for years and making occasional appearances on a small regional lifestyle program that aired weekday mornings to a modest local audience. She had never experienced a serious incident on set before. She was known for her warm personality and expertise in classic techniques requiring open flame preparation. That morning, she wore a flowing silk blend blouse in burgundy paired with her chef's apron and her signature pearl necklace. a gift from her late mother. The segment focused on preparing crêpes Suzette, a classic French dessert requiring tableside flambé with Grand Marnier liqueur. Producers had debated cutting the flambé portion due to safety concerns, but Lydia insisted it was her signature. The live segment began with Lydia preparing orange butter sauce in a copper pan. She added approximately 4 ounces of Grand Marnier to the hot pan and tilted it toward the gas flame to ignite the alcohol vapors. The alcohol ignited as expected, thin blue flames flickering across the sauce. Lydia reached for a serving plate while holding the flaming pan, turning slightly away from the camera. Her silk blend blouse sleeve, which had come unbuttoned at the cuff, draped forward and made contact with the flames. It ignited instantly, flames racing up her right sleeve from wrist to shoulder in approximately 2 seconds as the fabric fused and burned against her skin. Lydia gasped and dropped the copper pan, which spilled flaming liquid across the kitchen island. She instinctively began batting at the flames with her left hand, which caused the fire to spread to her left sleeve as well. Derek rushed toward her with a kitchen towel but hesitated, unsure how to help. Flames reached Lydia's hair, which had been styled with aerosol hairspray 90 minutes earlier. Her hair ignited in a sudden flash, flames spreading across her scalp and down to her face and neck. Her initial screams turned to choking, gasping sounds as the heat seared her airways and burned her facial skin. She stumbled backward and fell sideways onto the studio floor. Derek threw the towel over her upper body, but the towel itself caught fire from the intensity of the burning synthetic fabric. James grabbed a fire extinguisher but fumbled with the safety pin. By the time he deployed the extinguisher, Lydia had sustained 2nd and 3rd degree burns across approximately 38% of her body, including her face, scalp, neck, both arms, and upper chest. Lydia remained conscious, making hoarse sounds as she struggled to breathe. The burned skin on her face had begun sloughing off, and her airways were rapidly swelling from thermal injury. Paramedics arrived and recognized the severity of her airway burns. Her breathing had become labored and wheezing. They performed an emergency intubation in the studio to secure her airway before transport. While beginning fluid resuscitation, she was transported to the regional burn center in critical condition with dropping blood pressure and signs of shock. Lydia Grant died that afternoon from complications of severe burn injuries, including respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. The network immediately suspended all cooking segments involving open flame. Derek required psychological counseling and took a 3-month leave. Though the station never released the footage, a short off-screen recording briefly circulated in local culinary circles online before being removed. It was September 22, 2019, when 47-year-old Dominic Hayes arrived at the Riverside Tower construction site in Portland, Oregon, to conduct a safety inspection for the city's building department. Dominic was a Canadian structural inspector contracted under an international peer review compliance agreement, with years of experience evaluating high-rise projects across North America. Known for his meticulous attention to detail, he was specifically requested to assess the tower's steel framework before the next phase of construction could proceed. The Riverside Tower was a 40-story mixed-use building that had reached the 28th floor when concerns arose about welding quality in the steel beam connections. Dominic had reviewed contractor reports showing some irregularities, but had been told by the construction foreman that all critical joints had been re-inspected and certified safe for his walkthrough. His colleague Sarah had questioned the timing of the inspection, but Dominic trusted the contractor's assurances. The inspection team included project manager Lisa Rodriguez, safety coordinator Jake Morrison, and a building department photographer. The assessment required Dominic to examine beam connections on the 28th floor while documenting any visible defects in the steel framework. The inspection began with Dominic positioned near the building's northeast corner, explaining proper welding techniques while moving systematically along the exposed steel beams. A sudden metallic shift rang through the steel frame. Not a clean ping, but the deep scraping sound of a connection slipping under load. At the time, the inspection team assumed it was just thermal movement in the beams, a common sound on unfinished floors, and no one recognized it as the onset of structural failure. Investigators later determined that the noise originated from a critical load-bearing joint, where substandard welding had left a hidden flaw. Once the connection slipped, the compromised weld fractured instantly under stress. Within moments, the failure spread to adjacent connections, causing a localized collapse limited to the northeast corner between the 28th and 26th floors. The drop halted when the load was redistributed across lateral bracing and intact crossbeams, preventing full progressive collapse of the tower. The floor began sagging toward the center. Dominic lost his footing as the steel decking buckled beneath him. A primary support beam twisted and separated from its connection, and the entire northeast section of the 28th floor gave way. The floor section dropped in a pancaking motion, with Dominic falling through the failing structure. He dropped approximately 15 feet through twisted steel and debris before his body struck a horizontal I-beam at roughly 20 miles per hour. The impact broke his right arm, several ribs, and caused internal bleeding, but he remained alert and tried to grab onto the beam as the collapse continued. The partial floor failure extended downward through 2 additional levels before stabilizing, sending debris and structural members cascading through the open framework. As his body fell through the dust and twisted steel, the site's documentation drone, hovering in a fixed survey position, only caught a brief, obscured glimpse of movement before losing visual in the debris cloud. Dominic's body struck a concrete foundation wall at ground level at an estimated 45 miles per hour. His descent had been partially slowed by secondary impacts and structural interference during the collapse, preventing a full free-fall acceleration. The impact dislocated his shoulder and fractured his collarbone, while his torso compressed against the wall, causing severe internal injuries, including a punctured lung and damaged spleen. He sustained catastrophic internal injuries and was likely killed on impact. The collapsed floor section crashed down seconds afterward, burying much of the area in twisted steel and concrete debris. The drone, still hovering in its fixed survey position, passively recorded the aftermath. In the wide-angle feed, Dominic's body could be seen partially visible among the wreckage. Emergency responders needed over an hour to safely navigate the unstable debris field. Dominic Hayes was pronounced dead at the scene, along with 3 construction workers. It was November 23, 2017, when 29-year-old Phoebe Larson arrived at the staging area for Philadelphia's annual Thanksgiving parade. Phoebe worked full-time as an event coordinator, but volunteered her expertise to the parade committee each year as a passion project. Known for her infectious enthusiasm and organizational skills, she had participated in the parade for 6 consecutive years and had been promoted to lead handler for one of the parade's largest character balloons. The balloon was a 52-foot-tall cartoon character, requiring a team of 24 handlers using guide ropes to control its movement. Weather conditions that morning included sustained winds of 22 miles per hour, with gusts up to 34 miles per hour, approaching the parade's safety threshold. Parade officials had debated canceling the balloon portion, but decided to proceed with enhanced safety protocols. Phoebe had attended an early morning safety briefing, where handlers were instructed to immediately release ropes if wind conditions became dangerous. Her position was as lead handler on the front left guide rope, responsible for coordinating the team's movements. Her parents, visiting from Minnesota, were watching from the bleachers approximately 1 mile into the parade route. As Phoebe's balloon team approached the intersection of Market Street and 16th Street, wind speed suddenly increased. The balloon, which had been floating at a stable 15-foot altitude, suddenly lifted to nearly 30 feet as a gust caught its broad surface area. Phoebe immediately radioed parade control to report the dangerous conditions. A second, stronger gust estimated at 43 miles per hour struck the balloon from the west, causing it to tilt dramatically eastward and rise another 20 feet. The sudden upward force lifted 3 handlers on the eastern side completely off their feet. Phoebe shouted to her team to hold steady while the balloon continued rising. The balloon reached approximately 65 feet in altitude, and the guide ropes were at maximum tension. The front left rope that Phoebe was gripping suddenly snapped at a connection point near the balloon. The severed rope, still under extreme tension, recoiled violently downward and backward, the frayed end traveling at approximately 70 miles per hour. The rope struck Phoebe across her face and neck, the impact fracturing her jaw, shattering her left cheekbone, and crushing her larynx. She was thrown backward approximately 6 feet by the force of the impact, landing on her back on the asphalt parade route, with her head striking the ground. The impact with the ground caused a basilar skull fracture and immediate loss of consciousness. Blood began flowing from her nose, mouth, and left ear, classic signs of severe head trauma, while her body exhibited rigid posturing with arms and legs extended. Parade officials immediately halted the procession, and emergency medical personnel rushed to Phoebe's location. She was found unresponsive with irregular breathing and a weak pulse. Her pupils were unequal, the left dilated and non-reactive, the right constricted, indicating severe brain injury and increased intracranial pressure. Paramedics established an airway and began ventilation while preparing for immediate transport to the nearest trauma center. Her parents, who had witnessed the accident from the bleachers, were restrained by security as they attempted to reach her. Phoebe was transported to the trauma center, where emergency scans revealed massive intracranial hemorrhaging and severe brain swelling. Phoebe Larson was pronounced dead that afternoon after neurological testing confirmed complete cessation of brain activity. The parade was immediately canceled, and all balloon portions of future parades were suspended. Investigation revealed that the rope had been in service for 7 years, 2 years beyond its recommended replacement schedule. Her parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the parade organizers. The incident prompted multiple cities to revise their parade balloon safety guidelines, updating wind limits and equipment replacement schedules. It was February 16, 2015, when 38-year-old Grant Nichols arrived at the demolition site in Dallas, Texas, for what should have been the culmination of 6 weeks of meticulous planning. Grant was a demolition engineer and explosives expert who had overseen 67 successful building demolitions during his 14-year career. He specialized in urban demolitions requiring precise explosive placement to ensure structures collapsed inward without damaging surrounding buildings. Known for his methodical approach, Grant had earned a reputation as one of the most reliable demolition specialists in the Southwest. The project involved demolishing an 11-story office building that had been vacant for 3 years. Grant had spent 6 weeks planning the demolition, placing 847 individual explosive charges at strategic points throughout the building's support structure. The demolition was scheduled for Sunday morning to minimize traffic and ensure maximum safety. A 500-meter safety perimeter had been established, with police blocking roads and evacuating nearby buildings. Local news stations had been invited to broadcast the demolition live. Grant's observation position was in a reinforced command trailer located 550 meters south of the building. His wife, Rebecca, and their 8-year-old son, Tyle, were watching the broadcast from home. Grant performed his final safety check and initiated the firing sequence. The first series of explosions detonated on the building's ground floor as planned. The building's south side began collapsing inward as dust clouds billowed outward. An anomaly occurred. The building's north side failed to collapse as programmed, remaining partially standing while the south side fell. This created an unbalanced load that caused the remaining north structure to tilt southward rather than collapsing straight down. Grant immediately recognized the failure and shouted for everyone to move back. The tilting north section, approximately 6 stories of concrete and steel, weighing an estimated 2,400 tons, began falling southward like a toppling tree. The structure fell outside the planned collapse zone, aimed directly toward the safety perimeter, where emergency vehicles were positioned. Grant, realizing the danger to personnel, made the decision to leave the command trailer and run toward the perimeter to warn people. He exited the trailer and began sprinting north, waving his arms. The collapsing north section struck the ground approximately 480 meters from the original building footprint. The impact sent a pressure wave through the debris field, hurling concrete fragments and steel sections outward. A 12-foot length of number 11 rebar, weighing roughly 60 pounds, was launched by the force and struck Grant from behind while he was still running toward the perimeter. The bar hit across his upper back and neck at an estimated 30 miles per hour, severing his spinal cord at the C3 vertebra and fracturing his skull. Although the injury caused instantaneous loss of motor control, the remaining forward momentum carried his body several feet. Grant was thrown forward roughly 10 feet, his body tumbling across the ground before coming to rest face down. Television cameras had inadvertently captured Grant's final moments. Emergency personnel reached Grant, finding him unresponsive with no pulse. His neck was visibly deformed, and blood was flowing from his nose and ears. Paramedics began CPR, despite the obvious severity of his injuries. Grant Nichols was pronounced dead at the scene from a traumatic spinal cord transection and severe head trauma. The inquiry uncovered that a trio of demolition charges malfunctioned because of defective electrical connections, resulting in an uneven structural failure. The contracting firm faced legal liability proceedings and contract termination, which ultimately led to its insolvency. The incident led to updated demolition protocols, including mandatory secondary detonation verification checks before final firing sequences. It was July 9, 2016, when 33-year-old Jetta Howard arrived at the base camp in Chamonix, French Alps, for what should have been a routine mountain rescue operation. Jetta was a Norwegian mountain rescue specialist and paramedic who had been working in alpine rescue operations for 9 years. Known for her technical climbing skills and calm demeanor during high-stress operations, she had successfully participated in over 200 mountain rescues. The rescue operation involved extracting an injured climber from a steep rock face at approximately 11,150 feet elevation on Mont Blanc. A documentary crew had been filming a series about mountain rescue operations and had been granted live relay access for a regional alpine emergency broadcast, with helicopter footage transmitted in real time to local television affiliates. The injured climber, a German tourist, had fallen approximately 30 feet and sustained a compound leg fracture requiring immediate helicopter extraction. Weather conditions were marginal for helicopter operations, with gusty winds averaging 25 miles per hour and occasional stronger gusts. Jetta had been selected as the rescue specialist to be lowered from the helicopter due to her experience with technical extractions. The helicopter pilot was a French aviator with 22 years of alpine flying experience. The helicopter departed with Jetta secured in a rescue harness connected to a 100-foot steel cable winch system. The helicopter reached the injured climber's position and began hovering approximately 80 feet above the rock face. Jetta was lowered from the helicopter while carrying medical equipment and a rescue litter. She reached the injured climber and began assessing his injuries while communicating with the helicopter crew via radio. While Jetta was securing the climber into the rescue litter, a sudden wind gust estimated at 40 miles per hour struck the helicopter from the west. The helicopter was pushed approximately 50 feet eastward, causing the cable to swing dramatically. A second, stronger gust struck the helicopter, causing it to drop approximately 30 feet suddenly. The sudden descent created slack in the cable, which then snapped taut again, creating a violent whipping motion. Jetta was caught off balance and lost her grip on the rock face. The helicopter was struck by a third gust, an updraft that lifted the aircraft suddenly upward approximately 40 feet. The rapid ascent put extreme tension on the cable system, which was rated for 2,000 pounds but was now supporting dynamic loading. The cable attachment point on Jetta's harness, a carabiner that had been in service for 4 years, failed under the stress. Investigators later determined that the violent swing had side-loaded the gate, twisting it out of alignment. The carabiner gate broke open under the load, and Jetta separated from the cable, beginning an immediate free fall from approximately 95 feet above the rock face. Her body fell for approximately 2.1 seconds, rotating backward as she dropped. She struck a sloping rock face at approximately 52 miles per hour, impacting primarily on her back and left side. The initial impact fractured her spine at T7 and T8 vertebrae, shattered her left shoulder blade, and broke 4 ribs. Her body bounced off the sloping rock and continued falling, tumbling through the air for another 40 feet before striking a second, more vertical rock face. The second impact occurred head first, crushing her helmet and fracturing her skull in multiple places, with bone fragments driven into her brain tissue. She bounced again and fell another 60 feet, her body now limp, before striking a narrow ledge. The final impact broke both legs, her pelvis, and her right arm. She came to rest approximately 195 feet below her initial position. The entire fall was captured by both the helicopter-mounted camera and a fixed base camp relay feed. The footage was still transmitting live when the fall occurred, giving viewers only a few seconds of the incident before the broadcast was abruptly cut from the control room. The injured climber witnessed the fall directly from his position in the rescue litter. A second rescue team reached Yetta's position, finding her unresponsive with massive trauma. Yetta Howard was pronounced dead at the scene from multiple traumatic injuries incompatible with life. Investigation revealed the carabiner failure was due to metal fatigue from repeated loading cycles, leading to new equipment replacement protocols. The injured climber survived but required extensive psychological treatment. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.